Cool. All right. Yep. Just anyone who's coming in, just, take a seat.
Hello.
Love to have you. Thanks so much for coming. My name's Garret Stroup. I'm a doctor of physical therapy, and I'm the owner of Oregon Mobile Physical Therapy.
And I'm Dr. Mallow McKusick. I'm a physical therapist at Oregon Mobile Physical Therapy.
Yeah, and we're so excited to be here to try to teach you all about age-proofing your body. And we're so thankful, too, that Evergreen hosts these talks because a healthy community is a happy community. And I think Evergreen's been a major leader in our community about, maintaining health, promoting health, and building that kind of robustness for our bodies. So we're going to try to talk a little bit more about that. So we're going to go through kind of your why, discipline versus motivation, 5 pillars to wellness. Then Mallow's going to talk a lot more about function, and we're going to talk about a few common kind of issues and diagnoses. Okay? If anyone has any questions too, I know we're live on YouTube, but feel free to shoot a question, raise your hand. We'd love to hear from you. Okay? Great. So the first thing we're going to talk about is your why. Kind of the why is, you want to think about it like the keystone or the cornerstone in all of your decisions, right? Some people's whys are, I just want to be able to pick up my grandkids. Another person's why might be, I want to explore Oregon's forest. I want to be able to walk. I want to be able to run, or I want to be able to walk with my dog. There's a lot of different whys, and it's really important to know what is your why, because you want to hold on to that. Because when you're age-proofing your body, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, right? There's little aches and pains, right? And you got to deal with that. And if you wake up and know exactly why you're doing what you're doing, it makes everything better. Okay? So that's where we get into discipline versus motivation. So what's the difference? Well, motivation, anyone can be motivated for a second, a minute, an hour, a day. But to be able to do the same thing, the hard things, every day, day in, day out, for months, that's discipline. So I want everyone to try to think, like, when it comes to being physical in my body, when it comes to maintaining wellness, am I motivated or am I disciplined? And you always want to make sure you're disciplined. And if you're having a hard time getting to the discipline and being consistent day in, day out, try to talk with someone. Try to figure out what it is that you can do, because there is something you can do. And it's not going to just spontaneously come to you, because it hasn't yet. So you might as well ask. Okay? So next part, we're going to get to the 5 pillars of wellness. Now, in Oregon Mobile Physical Therapy, we wrote a book, an ebook online that you can access at our website, that you can download completely for free. And we really talk about these 5 pillars to wellness a whole lot. We created these 5 pillars based on finding out what people were having an issue with. So it's not like we find these 5 things really important and we just tell everyone. We notice that everyone who comes to see us is incredibly poor at one of these. And so we want to bring that to the forefront of everyone's brain so that way they know what to do. Okay? So the first one is water. I mean H2O. Now, mineral water, filtered water, not too worried about that. What I mean are when people don't like to drink water. Garret, I don't like water. Garret, I love water, but I always add my liquid IV or my Gatorade to it. It's like, no, then you don't like water. H2O is really, really important. We found how important H2O is with sweat tests. So we found that when you have liquid IV or a Gatorade or something that's sugary, or maybe it just says, no sugar, we found that the sweat that the person is secreting when they're working out or exercising is completely different. So that really shows that the stuff you're drinking, you might think that it's just a flavor aid, but it's completely affecting your whole body. Okay? So what's the standard? Generally, we find about a half a gallon. It's pretty good. Make sure you drink it in the morning, right? Because we all know what happens when we drink all of our water after dinner. We're up all night, in and out, every hour. So make sure you drink your water in the morning, drink it consistently, and then make sure you're drinking it alone, just with H2O. I mean, you can have it with your meal and all of that, but that way you're going to absorb it the best, and it's going to stay in your body, and it's not just going to come all out when you're going to bed at night. Okay. Next one are veggies. 3 to 6 servings, right? How many people are eating their veggies? 3 to 6 servings in here. It's kind of a struggle, though, maybe. Yep, there's a lot of different strategies on trying to eat your vegetables, but the big thing is that eat the rainbow. Variety is the spice of life. Change it up, but make sure you have 3 to 6 servings. There's macronutrients, like we talk about carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. Then there's micronutrients, which are like vitamins and minerals. But then there's this whole subset of phytonutrients. Phytonutrients, the best definition of phytonutrients is it's all the stuff that we don't understand how it works. But it's really important to know those types of things. Like, for example, we've all heard of emergency, right? I'm just going to overload my body with vitamin C and I'm not going to get sick. Well, emergency lacks the phytonutrients, so your body is shown to not absorb vitamin C that well if you just take it in its supplement form. But it turns out, if you have peppers or oranges, you absorb a whole lot more vitamin C, plus all the other nutrition that's also important. Okay? Sleep. We want 7 to 9 hours. Now, I watched one of the best presentations I probably watched this year from Dr. Britton, and all she did was talk about sleep. So there's a whole lot to learn, and this doesn't cover all of it. But if any of you guys see Dr. Britton, ask her about it. I know she has got a recording in there. But sleep is really important. Now, there's a lot of issues with medications, anticholinergics that Dr. Britton's talked about. Basically, it's chronic use of medications that help you go to sleep. That's not necessarily a good thing. I tell people, talk to your provider over at Evergreen because they're going to be able to really handle that well. Now, what can you learn from us about sleep? 7 to 9 hours. Try not to let your animals sleep with you. I learned that from Dr. Britton. She said it's amazing how many people can't achieve REM, random eye movement, sleep, which is not just when your body remembers and refines your memories, but also when you forget all the other stuff that's good to forget. And so it helps your brain just re-solidify. And if you don't achieve REM or random eye movement 3 to 4 times a night, you're going to have done a great job closing your eyes all night, but not sleeping. And then not sleeping is really well correlated with dementia and a lot of different neurodegenerative disorders that have a genetic component, a lifestyle component. But if you can look at some of the things you can change, sleep and then water. Those are really some great ones to do. Relationships. This one always seems to come out of left field from people. Thank you. So relationships are really, really important. I always tell people you can't pay a caregiver to truly care about the person that you want to care about. It's a bit too tough. They can do the activities, but to have a social network around you is so much more. You need to have the family member. I tell people all the time, I rarely see people who are 90 years old living on their own and not talking to other people, because there's a certain point in life where we just know we need the grandkids, we need the kids, we need the friends, and they all serve important roles. And really, this is when it's kind of like planting a tree. The best time to plant a tree was yesterday. The best time to make that relationship was yesterday. The second best time is right now. And you need to start those types of behaviors, because we all kind of know a person who, they may were, grown up in kind of a tough situation. And then they really learned how to build those great relationships. But then later on, when those inhibitions start kind of wearing away, you're like, who is this person? Where did this person come from? And it's the relationships you build and the kindness that you serve to people that really help kind of attract other people, and that law of attraction, Does anyone have any questions about any of those principles so far? Anyone kind of find so far out of these 4 out of these 5 that there's like one that you're like, yep, Garrett, you're right, I'm not good at one of those? Yep, everyone has them. Everyone has. What do you think yours is?
I just have a quick question. Does the veggies include fruit as well?
No, great question. But the veggies do not include fruit. Fruit's important. Fruit's great, but they're not 1 and 1.
But you still want your fruits and veggies.
It's tough to get my husband to eat veggies. He'd much rather have all different kinds of fruit.
Fruit doesn't make it up here because, again, that's not really an issue most people have, right? Most people are like, ooh, I love candy and sugary things. Like, that's great. That's why I didn't have candy bars on there either. We're all really good at that.
Like one of my children just only drinks but electrolyte drinks and flavoring and doesn't just drink water. What is the relationship to the sweating and why is that not as beneficial?
Well, there's a few things. So generally the drinks that are shown to be like 0 calorie, all of that, they're still trying to hit a neurotransmitter called dopamine to make a person want to drink that drink. So like we found like Coca-Cola, like maybe not addictive like smoking, like tobacco we found with nicotine, but that person really likes when they get that drink, right? It's kind of their treat, right? There's been a lot of things shown that it does still affect your insulin levels. It does still affect your ability to absorb your food. It does show your interest in wanting more sugary things, because sugary foods, they're kind of like they're like a slippery slope. Like, oh, if you practice moderation, have a little bit, that's fine. But once you have a lot, it somehow doesn't seem to still be enough next year, and then next year. And then all of a sudden, that drink that's kind of sugary isn't no longer the sugariest thing you have, because now you go to this thing. And we trick ourselves saying like, oh, it's got electrolytes, or it has these other things that you can't absorb at all because you're not having the phytonutrients. And when it comes to supplementation, generally, supplements are exactly that word. They're an additive to the general of what you do. And if you're not generally eating well, any supplement's not going to do nearly what it's intended to do, because you have to have good food. Make sense? Great questions.
You said it affected the outflow of the sweat. In what ways?
Well, the sweat, like the sweat content's different. So like sodium levels would be different. If you had, like a lot of people would say like, oh, well, the electrolytes should go into my body, and it's not proportional. So it shows that maybe it's not being absorbed actually. So now are you just having more expensive urine? Does that make sense?
And also keep in mind, your body is made up of a lot of water, especially your brain. So if you're worried about memory, your brain is one of the first things to get dehydrated and one of the last things to rehydrate. And if we want something to function well, right, we want it to have that moisture and that what it's made of in there. And so give yourself some water so that everything can be hydrated, including your brain, so you can work on memory and everything else, right? Your brain's kind of in charge of the whole system there.
Mm-hmm. And it goes back to the supplementation. Like if you were like, oh man, I really need a sugary drink because I skipped my meal, what was your real problem? Right? Veggies, right? Not having a real meal. Like, why would I add a supplement if I'm not doing the major thing correct? Great questions. And these are just, again, these are things that we just noticed, like after working with thousands of people, like, okay, which one are you having an issue with? And the very last one is function. And this is more of our bread and butter. Mal is going to take it from here.
So function is made up of a couple components. I wrote them up here for everyone, but we're going to go through each component. So to be able to actually do something, so you got the health down, you have your friends around, you have your family around, now you actually want to step down the stairs, right? For that, you need function. Part of that is going to be posture. So when you're thinking of posture, we always hear our moms, right? They're saying, nice posture. The reason for that is your anatomy is made a certain way. And you want to use the anatomy the way it was meant to be used, so you don't get wear and tear, breakdown, strains in the muscles, sprains in the ligaments. So we want to use good posture so that, one, it's easier to use your anatomy, and two, you aren't causing any problems while you're using your anatomy. A good example of that is, we're checking our emails on our computer. It's been a while. I'm kind of falling with gravity, right? At this point, the acromion process, which is a bone coming off of your shoulder blade, is rotated forward. If I try and reach over 120 degrees, I have a bony block. And so that's going to hurt my shoulder as I'm constantly lifting up and down, right? And so now I'm going to come up and go, this is sore. My back has been in an odd position for 30 minutes. My lumbago is kind of killing me, right? So that's going to affect everything. Same thing as, let's say I'm going to go pick up my grandkids, and I have a very hyper 2-year-old grandkid, right? And so they want to be picked up and set down and picked up and set down. If I'm doing some bad squat mechanics the whole time, oh my goodness, the next day now they're swelling around my knee, my ankle's a little stiff, my lumbago's going again, right? How many people have had back pain? And so you want to make sure you're using proper mechanics, using your hips, using your core muscles, using your knees, using your ankles, and even your big toe correctly, so I can go, oh, got that 2-year-old. Oh, he wants down. Now he wants up. Now he wants down. That's all going to be fine because my anatomy is being used the way it's meant to be used. You aren't going to get swelling, inflammation, which causes that pain signal to go to your brain if there's no reason for that swelling and inflammation to pop up. So that's why posture is so important. The next one is your range of motion. Every joint in your body is meant to be moved a certain amount. If it's unable to move that amount, the cartilage in the joint has a really hard time getting fully nourished. It's kind of like a sponge. It needs that movement to kind of squish that nourishment out and squish the waste products out. So for instance, let's say I want to pick up my grandkid again, right? And let's say, ooh, my ankle's been a little tight. A couple years ago, I sprained it. It's just been a little stiff coming back up ever since then. Now, every time I squat down, I can't quite bend there, right? So I'm going to have to kind of cheat over here a little bit because I can't truly bend at my ankle there. And the less I'm using that ankle, the tighter it's going to get, the more swelling and pain I'm going to get because that joint's not able to fully move and it's not getting fully nourished. So kind of when you're hungry, right, get a little cranky, joint's going to get a little inflamed. That's going to send a pain signal up to your brain. Your brain goes, there's a bear, everyone freeze. Let's turn off some stabilizing muscles. And now it's a little hard to catch my balance because my muscles are off, right? Same thing if you think about your neck. Who has a hard time checking their blind spot, right? You got to do a little body turn or kind of turn the car a little bit. Your thoracic spine, which is your mid-back, and your neck, they need a certain amount of motion so that you can do that without having to cheat a little bit, right? And so it's important to keep those joints nice and healthy so that you get that nourishment going to it so that you can keep moving how you want to move and keep using your anatomy the way it's meant to be used. Now, another big thing about nourishing those joints is if they're not getting enough nourishment, they're going to get more wear and tear. They're going to get more breakdown, and you can also get more osteoporosis as well. So think you want to keep moving so that there isn't a reason later on to not be able to move, okay? Another big part is strength, right? So let's say I'm super bendy. I was a gymnast back in the day. I got this. My posture is perfect. I also did ballet, right? But now I can't actually get that physical strength to pick up my grandkid, right? If I'm right here, I'm strong enough to pick up the big bowl at the crock pot, right? But to actually pick up my grandkid or my little dog or something like that, or my big box from Amazon, just a little bit harder, right? So then the big thing with that is you need that strength in the muscles to be able to go, okay, I got this. Now I can pick it up. Another big thing about strength is your joints have a passive stability system and they have an active stability system. That active stability system is the muscles that are going to surround the joint to help protect it and to allow it to move correctly. So I'm going to use your knee for an example. Anyone had knee pain before? So with your knee, you have your quadricep muscles. You have 4 of them. They're going to come in and attach to your kneecap. Then they're going to come along the tendon and attach this little bump here. Because they're crossing that joint there, they're going to help actively stabilize your knee. They also help you straighten your knee. Same thing with your hamstrings. You have 3 of them. They're going to all attach up in your tush. You have 1 coming along the outside, crossing that knee joint, 2 coming along the inside, and they crisscross with your top calf muscle. It's called your gastrocnemius. It's going to come along here, split into 2 heads to cross that knee joint. They're also, because they're crossing that knee joint, going to help actively stabilize it. So if you're really, really weak in one of those muscles, it's going to be a really hard one to move, but also to prevent any wear and tear coming along that joint there as well. Any questions on that?
And let me just kind of add to that too, is that your abdominal muscles also provide a lot of that control, because when you're trying to lift something, we all know to lift with our legs, right? But we might still not actually lift with our legs, even though we think about it. And so keeping a little bit of tension in your tummy while you're lifting something might be the difference between lifting like this and lifting like tension here, right here with my legs. So another kind of version of what Mal is talking about is active stability. There's really important muscles where when you lack that active stability, you get much greater problems. Like so many people with back pain having poor active stability of their tummy muscles, Knee one's a perfect example. There's hip ones too, ankle ones, hand, finger, elbow, shoulder. All of that exists. It just depends on your problems.
And that goes perfectly into body mechanics. So big thing with the body mechanics is, one, if you're using good mechanics, you're not going to stress a tissue more than it's meant to be stressed. So you don't have to worry about, oop, I strained my muscle, I sprained my ACL, something happened with my rotator cuff muscle, right? Another thing too is it's going to be easier to move. It's going to be easier to do the things you want to do. So for instance, if I want to step up my steps so I can get into my house, Oregon has lots of steps and none of them are normal. They're all a little tricky, right? So if I want to go into my house, I need to get my foot up, and then I have to use a squat to do that step up into the house. And so with that, I want to have my core muscles on. So I'm going to be squeezing my stomach. I'm also going to be squeezing my bottom. Your middle butt muscle is called your gluteus medius muscle. That is the main stabilizer for your back, your hip, and your femur bone, this big bone here, whenever you have a moment on one leg. So I need that muscle to stabilize me so I can be balanced and have my joints in a good position as I go up. So I want to have my foot up. I'm be hinging at my hip. Think squeeze it, stick it out. That's your squat, okay? And so you're going to come here, and then you can easily come up. If you're letting your knee kind of fall forward, right, we're just kind of jolting the body to get up and down that step. So you want to be able to really use that squat, which is the same thing as a lunge. You just have one leg that's not in that squat position. So this is my squat leg. The other leg can do whatever it wants, right? As long as I have that nice squat. Now at the end, if we have time, we're going to go over everyone's squat and lunge so that you're ready when you get home, okay? Another big thing is when I am reaching, right? How many people start having neck pain, upper back pain, shoulder pain whenever they're doing a reaching motion? Big thing to help open up the joints here is you want to, one, have your chest up. Once again, if you're in that forward position, I'm compressing my neck, my shoulders in a closed position, and I'm stressing out my thoracic spine or my upper back. So you want to think chest up. The next thing is you want your elbows in a rotated down position versus above your hand. No chicken dances going on here, okay? Now, if I have my elbow up and my hand down, what's happening is I'm closing down my shoulder joint there. So I'm bringing the head of my arm bone up against that acromion process, and ooh, there goes the rotator cuff, right? So you want to think elbows rotated down as you're reaching overhead, as you're reaching behind you to grab something, as you're sleeping. None of this. Bring it down. And then you also want to think thumbs rotated up or palms rotated up. Same thing, just opening up those joints there. So if I'm reaching overhead and doing something, I want my thumbs facing me. If I'm 90 degrees or higher. Same thing going behind me. I want that palm or thumb up. That's going to open up all those joints, and you aren't going to have any pain as you're moving around, okay? Any questions on that? Go ahead. So
That's all well and good for parts that work the way they're supposed to. When they stop working the way they're supposed to, it doesn't matter what you do, it just hurts.
And part of that, though, is getting all of this back. So if something's hurting, you might, because of that injury, you might now have a restriction from a muscle, from your fascia, from a joint capsule getting tight. And so you do have to get that back. But then you also have to start using your good posture, get your range of motion back, actively support that joint or that area. Use good mechanics, because once again, if you're using bad mechanics, you can have the perfect treatment for it. But if you're constantly using bad posture or mechanics, that same problem is just going to come right back, right? And then depending on what it is, you also have to regain your balance, so it's not a problem. So never think, oh, I got a bad knee, it's always going to be bad, right? There's always things you can do. You might have pains here and there. We all have some pains here and there. But if you can really fix these things, there's going to be very little reason for you to have an inflammatory process. That inflammation is what gives you that, ooh, that hurt pain, okay? They've done studies where they've taken imaging reports and put them in a stack for a radiologist of people who had zero pain and of people who had a ton of pain. And they found that there wasn't a big correlation between people who had a lot of things showing up on their imaging reports and how much pain they were in. There's people that were like, oh my God, this is a horrible report. They're like, I feel great. I just ran a half marathon, right? And then there's people where they're like, imaging looks perfect. Everything looks good. But that person's like, I can barely walk. I'm in so much pain. That's just the difference in inflammation and irritation with the things you're doing throughout the day, if you're not doing these or if you are doing these things. Does that make sense?
And the other thing too is like, Mallow, Garret, I know posture is important. I know I need to be more mobile and I should probably stretch. I know I should strengthen and go to the gym. I know. But if you don't know how to get the results, that's when you ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when it like you need to know who to talk to for that help. So you have to believe, number one, that these aren't just the cards I was dealt and there's nothing I can do, right? Because that's when we kind of just see the world as things that happen to us. But the difference between therapy and other types of services is that therapy tries to figure out, how can we get you to do them? How can you make that change? And the first thought always starts with, you have to think that you can. Because if you kind of think I'm the only one in the world who has this issue and no one can figure it out, you're right. And if you also think you can fix it, you're right. Because whether you think you can or can't, you're right. Does that make sense?
And
Awesome.
your body is always adapting. There's always new cells being laid down. So if you make changes to help your body work better, it will work better. It might take some time. For instance, it takes 6 to 8 weeks for a muscle to grow in size, right?
How long?
6 to 8 weeks.
Oh.
So don't quit next week.
Yeah. So it can definitely take some time, but your body will changes to the forces being put through it. It's called Wolff's Law. So if you start doing something to your body, it's going to start changing to help take in those forces that you're putting through it. And so we just want you to do the right forces through it, not the ones that are going to cause some wear and tear, even if there's already an injury.
Mm-hmm.
You said all of those relate to inflammation. Is there anything you recommend, a supplement or anything that helps?
So that part, yep.
Look at, something you can do without doing the 5 pillars of wellness. Is number 2 difficult for you? Wow. All right. Yeah.
But also kind of playing into this here, there's a lot of things that you can add to your foods to also that are anti-inflammatory. Berries are anti-inflammatory.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of properties in a lot of veggies that are anti-inflammatory. Cinnamon, black pepper, turmeric. So when you're cooking your stew and the kids aren't watching, right? Just keep shaking all that stuff in there. But that's all real food, right?
Mm-hmm.
Start with the real stuff before you go to the supplements, unless you have some, dietary thing or something going on with your colon that you talk to your physician about, and they're like, hey, this part of your body is not working to absorb that. That's when you want the supplements. If there isn't this big medical problem, though, start with the natural stuff, because your body is meant to absorb it. It's just like using your anatomy the way it's supposed to be used. Let your digestive tract work the way it was supposed to be used too.
And a lot of those, like calcium, for example, is generally recommended, as a capsule or something like that. But a lot of the other types of supplements that people take, like black pepper, or maybe you saw at Costco how they have turmeric pills. Most of those are shown to be much more effective when you add it to food. So just consuming things, and people are saying like, oh, I take these 40 vitamins in the morning. What would probably, maybe those are important. Like if you are doing the other aspects and you are eating well and you are doing this, then that's the best time to start looking towards those supplements. But in general, try to spice up your food a little bit, and that's usually the best way to go. Great question.
And you'll never get bored of what you're eating.
Right? Yeah, it'll help a ton.
I have a quick comment.
Yes.
It would help. I discovered a couple of years ago I had sciatica.
Okay.
So I go to Evergreen Urgent Care, and I figured out I had it because I had the same symptoms my husband had.
Okay.
And so I went into the doctor, and he said, well, it sounds like you've self-diagnosed. I'm going to write you a prescription for tramadol. I says, I don't want another pill. What else can I do?
Mm-hmm.
He said, walk. I says, okay, but it would help if doctors didn't always want to prescribe a pill for whatever's wrong with you.
Yeah, and that's also too where it's important to oftentimes to start with your primary care. You
Right.
know, let's make sure there's not something more sinister going on. But there also is trying to figure out, okay, like what are the things that primary really works on? And then what are there other professions that work on a similar diagnosis? And maybe you're not in favor for one approach, but you might be in favor for another approach. And so that's the nice part about healthcare in the United States is that you can shop it a bit, right? You know, if you don't want to go see this person, oftentimes you can see another person with those same credentials, maybe even at the same facility. But, you know, trying to figure out what connects with you and what works well for you and what's effective, not just what you want, but something maybe sometimes people tell you things that you don't want, but you still need to do it.
Yeah, but you may
And
still
so,
need
That's what he did. That's why I asked for an alternative. And I said, walk I can do.
I've had a doctor give me a script for yogurt
For
because I
yogurt.
had a cold. And I was like, all right. Get some prebiotics. I loved that.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Nope.
Okay.
So the next part is balance. So there's a lot that goes into balance. There's three main systems that help you stay balanced. One is your eyes. One is your somatosensory system, which is a big word that all it just means is your ability for your brain to tell where your body is in space. And then also your inner ear. So this isn't the part where you're hearing things where you can scratch, where there's wax. It's about the size of my nail here, and it sits behind your eye. And that's the balance center for your brain. And so those three things are going to help you keep your balance. Now, kind of think of it kind of like a three-legged stool, right? If one of them is affected, you can still balance, right? If two of them are affected, it's going to be really, really hard to balance that stool on that one leg, right? And so if you're having problems with vision, that's when you want to talk to your eye doctor, right? If you're having problems with your somatosensory system, you're like, I just have I feel kind of wobbly. I don't know where I am. Maybe I'm feeling a little like my depth perception is off. Maybe I'm starting to get a fear of falling. That's when you want to talk to your primary care physician, or you want to talk to your physical therapist. Go, okay, what can we do about this? And if you're feeling like, ooh, the room is spinning, or I have this internal dizziness, and I feel like I'm kind of a drunken sailor when I'm walking. The cops are looking at me a little oddly. Also, really good to talk to your physical therapist or your ENT and go, okay, is there something going on specifically with that inner ear? Now, to play into these guys a little bit more, for your balance to fully work in that somatosensory system to fully work, you have to have 90 degrees of big toe extension. So you want to keep that range of motion in your big toe. That's one of the biggest things we see people over the age of 50 starting to lose is, oh, that big toe doesn't bend as well. And guess what? When I am trying to catch my balance, or as I'm walking and rolling through my foot, it's now a whole lot harder to do that. Same thing going with my ankles. You want to keep that range of motion, and you want to keep that range of motion in your hips. One of the ways to catch yourself is to step, right? If you can't step, a little harder.
Mm-hmm.
Another big part of that is you have to have enough strength to be up, right? If someone's super, super weak, they're going to be really shaky because it's hard to keep themselves up. So that's where it's really important to keep your legs, especially your glutes, and also your core muscles, including your back muscles, nice and strong as well. And then also good posture, right? If I'm back here, I'm missing a foot back there, right? It's going to be really hard to balance. Also, too, if I am here leaning on my walker, if you take that walker away, I might just keep going, right? So think as much as you can, a little extra weight towards your toes versus your heels. So you're just a little bit forward. You don't have the foot going that way. You have it this way. So you want to use it in that direction. Any questions on balance so far?
Cool. And we have 4 strategies for balance too. So we have ankle strategy. So you see how my ankle's moving? That's a strategy for balance. That strategy is involved in all the other balance strategies too. Then we have hip strategy. So like we might find like, oh, it's a little uneven ground. I'm kind of moving over my hips to my foot. So then my ankle's working along with my hip. And then we also have suspension strategies. So like, you lower yourself down, you lower your center of gravity. That helps with balance. Need to be able to squat to do that. And then the other one is a stepping strategy that Mallow referenced earlier. That one is usually the one when people start having falls, they have lost their stepping strategy. And that's a big kind of issue because what ends up happening is people start developing a reaching strategy and then the table rolls, right? Or they start, you're in a parking lot and you're like, oh my gosh, I have nothing to hold on to. I can't cruise when I'm walking. And those are all really big issues that people develop without quite knowing it. And they start making those movement negotiations, where I'm like, okay, I like to walk around the room so I can hold on to it because I don't want to walk in the room because otherwise I might feel like I fall. And then we start, bringing down the functional levels. And then you start kind of placing bets and you just kind of place smaller and smaller bets like, ooh, I better not go there at this time because, well, I might not be able to park right in front. And if I can't park right in front, that's going to bother my knees. So you really want to make sure that you are attacking those balance strategies. But the tough part is Garret, I might be unsafe if I'm practicing those on my own. And that's where we tell you again, we give you all the knowledge, but if you still feel like you're having an issue, that's when you should ask for help. And to your point too, trying to find out who do I want to get help from, right? Because not everyone's help is what you're looking for, right? I mean, I'm working on getting a plumber to my house right now. And, it's like, you think all plumbers are, absolutely not, right? Not all plumbers are the same. Not all anyone is the same. It's not the same thing in healthcare.
And everyone has their own specialty too, right? You don't want me doing surgery on you or giving you a medication, right? But if you need help with your squats, I gotcha.
Yeah. Or your balance, I gotcha. Awesome. Does anyone have any questions about this? So those are basically the 5 pillars of wellness. So there's a lot there. And again, it's an ebook right on our website. So feel free to download it. It's free for everyone. Just download it and you can also read through this. So next, we're going to go through 3 common diagnoses because I think that's what we got time for. But before we go into that, does anyone have any questions? Awesome. So first one is arthro-knocking, right? Arthritis, right? The aches and pains that everyone kind of talks about. Like, Garret, I have arthritis in this joint. Garret, I had an injury a long time ago and it's just never been the same. There's no way you can fix that. And you're right. You can't fix arthritis, but there are a few things you can do otherwise. Because guess what? We see people all the time with arthritis. And we love to remind them that when they start their plan of care on their first visit, and maybe they finish 10 visits later and they're like, I'm back to walking, back to lifting, I'm a whole lot stronger. I always like to say, I bet that x-ray looks exactly the same. And it sure does, because we don't fix arthritis. We help prevent it from getting worse. And oftentimes, the arthritis isn't always the biggest issue that person's experiencing. It's the lack of movement that they're choosing to do because it kind of hurts and it's uncomfortable. And maybe we don't know if that uncomfortable pain is a good thing or a bad thing. Garret, I pushed through this one time and I couldn't walk for 4 days. You can't tell me that's good. And you're exactly right. That's not good. But maybe if we did a few other changes, you could have tolerated it. And then guess what? You could have done it again and then gotten even stronger. Arthritis can occur everywhere, right? Fingers, wrist, shoulders, knees, hips, back, all the way through the body. But most of the time, people have arthritis in joints that move well, and they don't notice it. Most of that's because it still moves well. And if you can move, you can be strong. If you can be strong, you can control it. If you can control it, you can use it, and you don't notice it when you're using it, right? Does that make sense? Cool. So arthritis, it can kind of happen everywhere. We don't necessarily fix it, but we sure make sure the other things are as strong as they can possibly be. Okay? Mel, do you want to hit fall risk?
Mm-hmm. So another big thing that people start getting a little more fearful, and they start getting a little more hesitant with their balance, especially if something's happened or as we get older, because one of these things kind of starts going away a little bit, okay? Now, there's a lot of things that can cause an increase in falls. And one of them is being dizzy. You do not have to live being dizzy. So if you are dizzy, then you need to talk to someone about that because that is not normal. and it doesn't need to be your normal. No one wants to get out of bed and go, okay, that was scary, right? No one wants to bend down and grab their cat, right? And go, oh my gosh, I almost did a somersault there, right? So if you are feeling like, oh, I am feeling lightheaded when I change positions, or I feel like I'm starting to get tunnel vision, or I feel like when I'm moving, I get a clunk and then I kind of feel like I'm going to black out. Those are some red flags for some things. You want to call Allie Blaine, you want to call Dr. Moffitt, you want to call whoever you're seeing at Evergreen and say, hey, can I get screened for this lightheadedness, which maybe that's from your blood pressure? Or can I get screened for this, I move and I look up and now I'm starting to get tunnel vision. Maybe I need to have my vasculature screened for that, okay? So those are kind of red flag things. If you're noticing lightheadedness, tunnel vision, clunking in your neck, and not like little pops, like, oh, I turned and I got a clunk. Or if you're going, oop, I feel like I'm going to black out when I'm moving, okay? Talk to your Evergreen provider about that. Now, if you're dizzy and you feel like, okay, the room is moving around me, I am spinning, that's a key sign that you have BPPV. And what that means is there's actually no damage that's from that. What happens is there's little crystals that are in the inner ear, and they're supposed to be in your gravity center. And if something happens to cause more of those crystals to drop down, or if you haven't been getting enough vitamin D3, it's winter in Oregon, the sun's not out, we naturally get vitamin D3 from the sunlight. Let's say you're a little low on vitamin D3. That's what absorbs those crystals as they naturally fall down in that gravity center. So now you have a big bucket of crystals that are moving in these canals that are supposed to be just fluid canals. So it's like I took a bunch of sand, put it in a water bottle, and I'm sloshing it around. Your brain gets the impression that the room is spinning when you are moving. And that is actually a very, very, very easy fix. It usually takes 1 to 4 treatments to fully clear that up. And then you have to make sure you're getting enough vitamin D3. So go get some sun out there, okay? So if you're noticing any room spins, please talk to a physical therapist or an ENT that specializes in vestibular or inner ear therapy, okay? Now there's another type of dizziness where it feels more like you're dizzy inside your head. So kind of like you're on a boat, or you're kind of just moving one direction, or you can even have spinning inside your head. That can be due to damage in your inner ear. And when one inner ear is damaged and the other one's not, this one's sending a lot of signal, this one's not sending that much signal. And what happens is your brain gets the wrong impression of where you are in space. So your ears say, hey, I think we moved 10 degrees. Your eyes see the world move and they go, I think we moved 20 degrees. And your brain goes, I don't know where we are. Eyes figure it out, and your eyes will actually twitch to figure out where you are in space. That's called a vestibular hypofunction. Also, very kind of like arthritis. We can't fix the damage, but we can recalibrate that signal so that nothing makes you dizzy anymore. So definitely something you don't need to live with. So if you are dizzy, talk to someone about it, because that doesn't have to be normal, okay? Now, another big thing that we kind of touched on already with fall risk is if you're having problems with where you're like, I'm not dizzy, but I just feel kind of scared when I'm moving. I kind of like it when I touch something. When it gets dark, I want to touch something, or I feel more off when I get up to go to the bathroom at night. If I move quickly, I'm like, oop, that was a little hard to keep my balance. That's because something is going on with one of these things. Well, clearly that one, but one of these things here, okay? And so that is also something. Go see your physical therapist. You want to see someone who's going to help regain that normal posture, that normal range of motion, that normal strength, and that normal mechanics, so that your somatosensory, one of those 3 balance systems, is nice and strong. And they can do that with assistance and without assistance from your eyes and your inner ear, so it gets nice and strong. And that way you can be like, yep, I'm going to go walk on the beach. I'm going to go jump some rocks near the river with the grandkids. Or, I can chase after my dog on uneven ground, even when, it's dusk or dawn, okay?
Good stuff. Good stuff. And next thing, rotator cuff. A lot of people are like, oh, I was told my rotator cuff is torn. And my first question always is, which one? And a lot of times people are like, I guess I didn't really ask which one. I kind of thought it was just one thing. Your rotator cuff is a group of 4 tendons and muscles that work all together. You have your teres minor, you have your infraspinatus, your supraspinatus, and then you have another one called your subscapularis. So all 4 of those are rarely ever torn. Very commonly, one of those is irritated. And again, the most common one that's irritated is your supraspinatus. And let me tell you why. Let's go to posture. So supraspinatus lives right here. Right here, stacked up, right? If you have like 5 cans of soda, right, you can like stack those up nice and easily, right? But you tip it forward a little bit and they all start falling down. So all of a sudden, the supraspinatus, which is just a little tiny muscle and a little tiny tendon in your shoulder, when you lean forward, all of a sudden now it's the primary muscle holding up your arm. Yeah, right? All of a sudden, this little tiny tendon. Because if we kind of think about our arm, what is the only bony attachment our arm has to our body? Sound mistake. The only bony attachment your body has to your arm has to your body, though, is your little clavicle, right? We all know of someone who's broken their clavicle, if not once or twice, right? The clavicle is extremely small, not tough bone. So what holds your arm to your body primarily? Your shoulder blade, and it has the trapezius. It has this, the serratus anterior, which attaches to your ribs. So it's really how your arm attaches to your body is truly your shoulder blade to your rib cage. And so if your thoracic spine's like this, and your ribs don't really move around anymore because osteoporosis starts affecting the ribs, it's one of the first groups of bones that get affected earlier. You get a little tight, you get a little stiff, your posture starts here, and then all of a sudden you can't reach up any higher. But then you're like, I still got to reach that thing. So then you bend your elbow, and you're like, I still got to grab it. So then you move your wrist. And then all of a sudden you're like, Garret, I've been getting a lot of elbow pain lately. And that's really common for a lot of people because they're not rotating their arm anymore. They're keeping it tight, fixed forward, and they're just kind of reaching like this. How many times we see kind of people like, okay, let me grab this. Oh, can you get that for me? I just can't get it. And then they're bending their, knees. They're using everything else except for their shoulder. And so a lot of times it's not just your rotator cuff, but it's everything around it, because your rotator cuff is pretty darn good. It's a very conscientious group of muscles, but it's everything else that's like, rotator cuff has got it. Yeah, supraspinatus can hold up our arm. It's like, are you sure? It's like one of the smallest muscles in our body. Yeah, it's done fine, up to this point. And so it's one of those areas that you want to know which one is irritated, and your physical therapist can check it very easily. If you have a shoulder issue and you can't raise your arm up, you got a grade 3 tear. There's nothing able to move your arm, and it usually doesn't hurt when it's completely torn because there's nothing to injure anymore. It's just completely torn. Usually surgery, boom, right away. That's an easy one. Grade 1 is usually just inflammation. That's when the rotator cuff is irritated, but it doesn't show on imaging. You're just like, it really hurts right there. Maybe it kind of travels down your shoulder here. It just really hurts right there, but I did imaging and there's nothing problematic per imaging. Okay, nothing's torn, but how's your body using that? And then grade 2 is always tricky because generally people don't always get imaging for that, but they have that same issue for a long period of time. And one thing that a lot of people kind of think of is that grade 2, that I don't want to get surgery, so I guess it's just a death sentence. I guess my arm just will never move again. But one thing that we always get our patients doing whenever they have a grade 2 tear, passive range of motion should still be completely full. So when I take your arm, I should still be able to move it in the full range. Your tendon tear has nothing to do with that. Now there might be arthritis, which we got to work through. There might be tight muscles or weak muscles, or maybe your ribs are really stiff and sore. And when I push on the rib joint, you're like, like, what did you just do to me? Take that knife out of your hand, but those ribs are what your body's trying to hold your entire arm up with, not your bones, not your little clavicle. Your little clavicle is meant to rotate a little bit. But that's a lot of times those are the main issues we notice with a lot of people when we first start seeing them with rotator cuff issues, is most of the times they've suffered through it for the last 10 years and they just kind of decided for some reason that they can't do anything about it. I have no idea why people come to that conclusion, but it's extremely common. And almost every time I work with someone who's had a chronic shoulder issue, That is the first thought that they always tell me, I did this and it never worked, so I just assumed nothing would. But that's where you got to know these are the important principles. And if you don't know how to apply those to your body, which is understandable, they're really difficult. And we've worked with thousands of people to figure this out. Ask for help.
I'm dealing with a chronic problem because it's a lack of cartilage.
There we go.
At 48, I had both knees replaced. And my shoulder doctor looked at my x-ray and said, so tell me about your knees. It's like, huh? And 4 years ago, or actually more than that, I was down to like 10%.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a path that they can help me manage until I actually get the joint replaced?
Absolutely.
It's getting progressive. It's gotten so bad that it's just misery now.
Yeah. And there is absolutely effective procedures to work on that. Now, again, imaging is going to look the same. So it's not like we're fixing the image of that. But I guarantee you, though, that you're having
function and decreasing pain. Those are great things.
Right? I mean, for example, have you noticed, like, they're not diagnosing a bunch of issues in your spine, right? But have you noticed how sitting up's been harder? Right? Have you noticed how your head is kind of wanting to maybe move in a different position, or maybe standing up perfectly straight like you used to maybe is a little bit tougher because that shoulder's coming forward a little bit? Yeah, little things like that. That's what I mean, though. That's what the body does because of this pain. See, like, we all learn these motor milestones when we're like a year old, right? Okay, we got to like sit up, we got to roll. And that's your body that's your brain teaching your body how it's supposed to move. But the thing is pain throws your body in chaos, and it doesn't know what a hospital is. It just knows that there's tigers out there and it doesn't want to get eaten today. So it's like, okay, shoulder hurts, still got to throw that spear, right? So we got to find a way to do that. That's why pain is actually very adaptive. It tells you when you're starting out with an issue, and it tells your brain, hey, we need to find a way to do this because how we've been doing it isn't in the cards anymore. And that's where therapy is really helpful to show, hey, it's in the cards, but maybe we can't start with throwing a spear. Maybe we got to find something a little easier than that.
And
Does that make
also,
sense?
too, if you hear like decreased cartilage, bone on bone, degenerative disc disease, DDD, degenerative joint disease, DJD, if you're hearing any of these terms, they just mean arthritis. That means you have arthritis. Your anatomy, because of a trauma or because of a mechanical or postural thing, has some wear and tear on it. And let's face it, if you're older than 18, you probably have arthritis somewhere, right?
Arthur is sadistic.
He's a mean guy. I know. I don't know why he like gets invited to so many people's houses. Arthritis. So a little quick example for me to talk about me for a second. I used to be a kicker at University of Illinois. I never started, but played a lot. I broke my ankle, so my ankle got really stiff. Someone pushed me down some stands because I was cheering for my football team. And so I broke my ankle, got really stiff. Didn't really rehab it very well. I was 20. We didn't really have a great rehab department. Like, you'd guess D1 football, you have good rehab. Nope. Anyway, so they made me immediately start deadlifting right when I came back. Well, when I deadlifted, my ankle wouldn't bend very well, kind of like what Mallow said earlier. And I twisted with about 350 pounds on that bar, and herniated several discs in my back. Couldn't touch my knees anymore. I had to stop playing football. Didn't really want surgery. Didn't really qualify for it either, being kind of 20 years old. It's not like my feet were completely numb and I wasn't getting a bunch of neurological symptoms. But what did happen is after about 2 years, I was like, okay, I got to really figure this out because this is not working. Worked on a lot of things, worked on my range of motion, worked through strength. Eventually went to physical therapy school, learned a whole lot more there. Right back to deadlifting now, 350 pounds again. If you look at my back, I do not have discs that are very well defined in MRIs where I herniated them. They're pretty much gone. Degenerative disc disease. Most people get it kind of starts at 35. I got a little bit on the fast track to like 23 years old. No one would ever even notice that I have an issue. I mean, I can touch I'd be able to touch my toes more easily. I worked out yesterday, so I'm really sore. But I can usually touch my toes. I can run. We go rafting, rock climbing all the time. But that's just an example. Yes, in a younger body, but an example of significant medical issue, having arthritis, still moving pretty well in life.
And if you have that DJD, DDD, bone on bone, any arthritis term in a joint, that means that the passive support system is breaking down. You still have an active support system. Use those muscles to actively support it. Use the advantage of posture and body mechanics to actively support it. Remember, if you're not getting inflammation, it's not going to feel horrible, right? If you're getting lots of inflammation, you go, I'm going to hobble out really quick, okay?
Any other questions? We'd love to hear them. What did everyone learn? Did anyone learn something or like, oh my gosh, I had no idea about that? You're shaking your head. Number 1 and 2? Honestly, number 2 is my toughest. My dog, we feed him carrots all the time, and my rule is I have to eat a carrot before I give it to him. I mean, you find weird ways to work it, but it works. It increased my servings. That number 2 is my hardest. Did you learn something that you felt was really interesting?
Not really.
Okay.
It just kind of reinforced what I already knew.
There we go.
That I need to get into therapy because the pain has gotten so bad, and to make things even better, I'm getting ready to go do a home inspection. And by the way, at the end of that, I'm going to crawl underneath the house on my elbows and knees.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's not always knowledge, but sometimes it's a bit of empowerment. You're like, or maybe a little bit of urgency on it. It's like, okay, I listened to Garret and Mallow, and they said that there is something that can be done, and maybe I should take that a little more seriously today.
I've done physical therapy for my back because I've got a couple of bone discs. I've done physical therapy for my shoulder once. It's time to do it again.
There we go. There we go.
Sometimes too, you also don't notice things when it's you, right? Sometimes you'll be like, oh, everyone keeps telling me that, I'm walking kind of funny. And you're like, I feel fine, but you're kind of coming forward, right? Sometimes you just need that external input to be like, I want you here. And then you're like, oh, I feel it now. That is where I need to be, for an example, right? So never be worried to ask for help. There's a reason there's a healthcare system in the United States, so that we can all kind of find that venue that works for us so that we can keep moving and stay functional.
So
it's hard to get your posture right when you've been. My son says I'm leaning more and more all the time, but it's in the morning it's not so bad. But when I get tired, it's very hard to hold my neck and my shoulders back and walk straight.
And that's going to be a little bit more of a strength thing, right? Because if you don't have the strength in your postural muscles, then as you get tired, you're just going to kind of fall a little bit, okay?
I've got the additional issue of scoliosis.
And
so I'm tipped.
And don't worry too much about having scoliosis unless it's so severe that it's affecting how you're breathing. The curves in our back allow us to absorb forces. So one perk to scoliosis is you can actually handle a few more forces coming from the ground force and from gravity. The problem is this: if you let yourself fall into that rotation aspect of the scoliosis, then what you're doing is you're allowing one part of the spine to get weak, and you're changing that range of motion, right? And so we're really working on that posture elongation, and then also getting that strength component in a lot of your stabilizer muscles, so that you, especially when you get tired or if you're doing something that's kind of harder or heavy, you don't want to go into that curve. So scoliosis is not the end of the world. Don't worry.
Sometimes it feels like it.
Well, and Mallow works through. She has scoliosis. And scoliosis isn't like if you have any curvature. Like scoliosis, I think now they say it's like if it's 8 or 12 degrees, then it's diagnosed as scoliosis. And Mallow's is probably more than that, I would say.
But you can always move out of that curve. They have whole institutes to work on specifically scoliosis. So there's all sorts of exercises, stretches, postural things that you can do specifically for that.
And one of the things I think we learned in surgery more recently is being perfect isn't the goal. Being your best self is the goal. Because when we tried to put a bunch of hardware and straighten out everyone's spines, did not help them at all. It's pretty not great for any of those people. What's best is for girls and boys around 12 to 14 is to accurately assess, like, oh, do they have a propensity towards experiencing more scoliosis as they develop? And then when you are diagnosed, to work on it no matter what. It's just like planting the tree, right? Best time to work on your scoliosis was yesterday. Next best time is right now. And so they're not like, they are diagnoses and they are real observations. But I would by no say, if anyone came to me, say like, you know what, you came to me with a diagnosis, I guess I can't work with you. That's what we work with. Only people with diagnoses. If you don't have a problem, we don't see those people. We only see the people who have issues. So never use an issue to discredit why you can't get better.
And everyone's anatomy is different. It's figuring out how to use your anatomy the best way you can.
So we want to thank you guys again for coming. We know we're kind of hitting our time right now, and we really want to thank Evergreen again for making this happen, because Evergreen is such a good health leader in Roseburg. So we should be very thankful that they're here, that they take the time to do this, and they really care about the community this much. Amazing group here, and I highly recommend every provider.